To order, we will begin with our invocation. Pastor Gordon, if you would please lead us in prayer.
Thank you all once again for this privilege and opportunity. So let's pray together. Father, I thank you for the ability to be here today, for the gift of life that you have given each one of us. Thank you that every good and perfect gift, Lord, you tell us is from you, and that you have established a good gift in the governments that we have. So, Father, I pray that you would give our commissioners the wisdom they need to make the decisions that will be a benefit and a blessing to all the citizens of Clay County. That it would strengthen us, it would keep us safe, and in all of these things, Lord, we would be beneficiaries. Father, I lift up the families of the commissioners and the staff who work here in this building, thankful for the time they are allowed to invest in this wonderful endeavor of leading us and helping with the good of our community. So, Lord, bless this meeting today. In every decision that is made, allow wise choices to be made. Lord, we love you. We thank you for watching over every one of us. We thank you for the beautiful weather. We thank you for your presence and your watch care over all of creation. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte?
Here.
Commissioner Withington?
Here.
Commissioner Lawson?
Here.
Commissioner Wagner?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here. That brings us to approval of this afternoon's agenda. Is there a motion related to the approval of the agenda for this afternoon's meeting? Commissioner Wagner.
Move to approve today's agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval of today's agenda. Are there any comments? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
That brings us to ceremonial matters. I believe we have one item. Administrator, if you'd like to proceed.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to introduce Highway Administrator Terry Griffin. She's going to come forward and recognize 5 of our employees from the Highway Department and talk a little bit about their accomplishment.
Good
Very good.
afternoon. Terry Griffin, Highway Administrator. The Missouri Local Technical Assistance Program, known as MOLTAP, has an educational program that's designed to recognize skilled transportation and public works personnel. The Scholar Program provides training to enhance the skills of individuals involved in the maintenance, delivery, and management of local infrastructure and to increase technical maintenance and administrative skills. To earn the designation of Scholar 1, the participants have completed a minimum of 32 hours of training, which includes core courses in work zone and flagger training, communication skills, and worker safety. Additionally, they have completed elective courses in a variety of specialties, including culvert installation, chip seal best practices, chainsaw safety, snow and ice control, equipment operation, defensive driving, and other things that affect the Highway Department. With the addition of the 5 men being recognized today, 15 of 20 eligible employees have now completed the Scholar 1 program and are beginning work on the Scholar 2 status. Each individual receives from MOLTAP a certificate as well as a specially designed Carhartt jacket with the MOLTAP logo on the sleeve and the Scholar program on the chest. The men have already received those, and today we're going to give them certificates of participation or certificates from the commission showing that they've completed those courses. So I'd ask the men who are here today to come forward, please. We have Travis Almond, Troy Mull, Dustin Fisher, Danny Pachat, and John Zuclin, who could not be here today. Congratulations, guys.
Wants to stand here or come around?
However you want to do this.
Just go around.
Okay, we're going to take a quick photo. If I can squeeze everybody in. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, and thank you.
That brings us to our public comments section. Are there any members of the public present who would care to speak? Seeing none. That brings us to our consent agenda. Administrator?
The consent agenda allows the commission to act upon items considered to be routine and approved in one motion. These may include items that have been reviewed by the commission in a prior session. There will be no separate discussion unless a commissioner requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. There are 2 items on the consent agenda this afternoon: the commission meeting minutes from April 19th and Resolution 2023-167, approving invoices from May 5th to May 11th for 255 invoices totaling $309,774.78.
Is there a motion related to the consent agenda this afternoon? Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Move to approve today's consent agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval. Are there any commissioners who would like to comment? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
That brings us to our regular agenda. The first item on this afternoon's regular agenda is 2023-170. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-170 is consideration of invoice payments from May 5th to May 11th for the County Prosecutor's Office. There are 15 invoices for a total amount of, $3,193.62.
Are there any questions of the administrator or of anyone? Is there a motion for 2023-170? Excuse me, Commissioner Wagner?
Yes, move to approve 2023-170.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-170. Discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
I recuse myself.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next on our regular agenda is 2023-169. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-169 is approval of a professional services contract with Olson Studio for the Clay County Comprehensive Plan update. This topic was presented to the commission last week during discussion item by staff and also by the proposed vendor, Olson Studios, who is here to talk about the program and the public outreach that will occur during that process. We're happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Withington, yes, Commissioner Withington?
Yeah, I can't remember, so maybe you can help me, or Kip. How was Olson selected?
Kip Jones, Planning Director. So we put out a request for proposal. In the RCA, I think you can see that that proposal went out to over 1,600 vendors, 70 downloaded the request, and then we ended up with 2 proposals. There was a review committee that was selected, reviewed those 2 proposals, and is recommending that Olson be approved.
Good deal. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Quick question. I'm looking at the hourly rate that they will be paying them. It looks like everybody on the project is making over $100 an hour. The minimum is an assistant planner is making $102 an hour, while the senior engineer makes $212 an hour. That's over $440,000 a year if that was full time. Is that a normal going rate for this kind of work? And if so, I'm in the wrong line of business, but
I'll be honest with you, of the 2 proposals, they were similar priced. So I assume that's normal, but this is my first time going through the comp plan. I don't know if the county administrator wants to.
Right. So as typical, they will put hourly rates in case that we need to do any scope of work outside of the contract. But this is actually a contract amount with a not to exceed unless we ask for additional services. So that's why the hourly rates are in there. It does cover not only the salary, but also covers the cost of benefits for the business, travel time, and those kind of things that may be associated with the services they may be provided. So when we, last year, during the budget process, did some research with regard to what would a comprehensive plan for the county cost, getting a ballpark figure to place funds in the budget, and they were pretty much all in the same area of this amount, doing a county-wide comprehensive plan update.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Is there a motion related to 2023-169?
Yes, move to approve 2023-169.
Motion is made for the approval of 2023-169. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Next on our agenda is 2023-171. Administrator.
Resolution 2023-171 is consideration of a professional services contract with Great River Engineering for the replacement of the Stockdale Road Bridge over the Canadian Pacific Railroad. And Highway Administrator Terry Griffin is here to provide information to the Commission.
Please proceed.
Terry Griffin, Highway Administrator. We are requesting... Terry Griffin, Highway Administrator. We are requesting the approval of a professional services contract to replace a bridge on Stockdale Road that crosses the Canadian Pacific Railroad tracks. The project goal is to complete a cost-efficient total bridge replacement that requires minimum long-term maintenance. The bridge is located east of Liberty on Stockdale Road, as the name indicates, between US Highway 69 and Missouri Route H, and provides an above-grade railroad crossing. The current bridge was built in 1930, so it's over 90 years old, and spans 2 tracks of the Canadian Pacific Railroad. The bridge is posted for 11 tons, so farm equipment, school buses, trash trucks, and so forth must make a detour of over 6 miles to avoid crossing the bridge. Stockdale Road is a typical 2-lane country road, as you can see in the upper right picture, but the bridge narrows to 1 lane at the bridge, creating a potential hazard for drivers, especially those who are unfamiliar with the roadway. The bridge sits about 30 feet over the railroad tracks, and embankments on each side of the tracks are supported by massive concrete retaining walls. The bridge railing does not meet current safety standards, nor does it prevent debris from falling from the road onto the tracks below. The bridge deck has been repaired multiple times and still shows signs of wear, and the structure itself is scheduled by MoDOT for regular fracture-critical inspections. The new bridge will provide a high-quality, efficient, and safe roadway for 2 full lanes of traffic and will meet all local, state, federal, and railroad construction requirements. Specifications for engineering services were provided to purchasing by the Highway Department. The RFQ is posted on public purchase where 35 vendors access the documents. 4 responses were received and distributed to the evaluation committee. Great River was chosen as the company that provided the best RFQ response that meets all specifications. Great River has previously designed other bridges for the county, including most recently the bridge on Greenwood Road that reopened last year. For this contract, the design phase cost is $234,860 and construction administration cost is $170,565, bringing the total engineering contract cost to $405,425. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been on that bridge before. It's sketchy to say the best. One of the things that struck me, because I was aware that, school buses go across that, and it did strike me 2 things. One, that it was very dangerous and not really a safe place to have a school bus go across, or any other vehicles for that matter of any size. I guess the other question I have is, it's important from that point of view, but also because these vehicles have to avoid this bridge, or at least they probably would be well advised to do so, the circuitous route they're forced to take, I would think in some cases might also present a separate set of hazards. Can you give us any information on that?
Well, if you reroute to avoid the bridge, you go on other county roads. They're rural county roads. It depends on which route you take to get around which direction you're going, so yeah.
And this is obviously much more direct.
Right, the minimum route that you can take to get from one side of the bridge to the other is just over 6 miles.
Well,
of a
since
detour.
it went up in 1930, I think we probably got our money's worth.
I think we've gotten our money's worth, probably.
I believe so. Any other questions? Commissioner Withington.
What's the timeline for this project?
We don't have a specific timeline yet. We anticipate that the engineering design phase, partly because of the delays that the railroad requires us to make, will take anywhere from 18 to 24 months, with construction probably somewhere in 2025.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion related to 2023-171?
Yes, move to approve 2023-171.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-171. Any further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Next, our agenda are 2 companion items, 2023-172 and 173. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2023-172 is a request from the Commission to transfer funds within a fund having to do with ARPA funding for the project. And Resolution 2023-174 is approving, 173, is approving an amendment to Resolution 2021-331, increasing the cost for a project in the detention facility. And Captain Agdarian is here to provide information about the project and the costs. And if the Commission wants additional information with regard to ARPA funding, I'll be happy to go over the ARPA funding availability for you.
Please proceed, Captain.
Good afternoon, Captain Amy Agdarian, Clay County Sheriff's Office. I'm just going to give kind of a brief history of this touchscreen and lock project in detention and walk you through why we are asking for the additional ARPA funding for this project at this point. So in 2021, December specifically, at that time the Commission approved project funding for an integrated touchscreen, lock, intercom, and camera system within the detention center. The total amount of this project was just a little over $2 million, and you can see the breakdown on the screen. At this time, the only amount that has not been billed to us is the 5-year complete care system, and that will not be billed until the project has been completed. So this is what we started with. And this is the event that led me to be here today. So in 2022, we began the on-site engineering and planning, and it was discovered that there is fire alarm wiring, or was fire alarm wiring inside the control panel with, at that time, the current jail security wiring for the controls and the touch screens that we currently had. So initially, when we did the 2001 expansion, Simplex was the company that came in and did this initial wiring. It's my understanding that it should have been not wired that way in the beginning. It should have been split to have fire controls and security controls separately, but obviously 2020 hindsight, 22 years later, that's not really what we're addressing. So that's how it was wired, and now we have discovered that the alarms wiring needed to be moved in order for ECC to move forward with the project. So ECC, which is Electronic Contracting Company, that's the company that's come in to do the actual installation of the new touchscreens. They offered to do the move, but it was discovered that Johnson Controls, which had bought out Simplex, would not warranty the work if ECC did the work. So ECC had to do some reconfiguration of equipment that had already been built before we knew this was an issue, and now we find ourselves with, at the beginning of 2023, we had $515,000 and some change left on the open purchase order for the original project. We had paid for the design fee, we had paid for the install, but we are waiting, holding back that $469 to pay for the complete care plan. So you can see there that what we end up with what was left on the PO, what we still owe for the 5-year care plan, the cost to reconfigure equipment and hire Johnson Controls to come in and move this fire wiring and split it to a separate cabinet leaves us about $104,000 short of the actual project installation. So I think, no, we're going to get to that later. Okay, so that's where we stand today, and that is why the companion item, well, I'm sorry, did I get a little too far? Okay, so we're actually asking for a total of $450,000 on this RCA to address another issue, which is not only this $104,000 shortage to get the project completed, but the additional cost to house inmates out because we do not have full control over the power. It's disrupted here and there, so these locks are connected to the touch screens, and that is how we open and close doors. And it's great, you know, because you just have one person in a control center for a whole area. But during this power disruption, ECC is installing new consoles, new touch screens, and we will have to shut down certain parts of detention because we can't have inmates in them, in that area, in those day rooms, because we are having to physically key, unlock, and lock the doors again because we don't have the touch screens deployed yet. So, working with the prosecutor's office, we have identified those inmates that could be allowed to be released on an ROR bond to help us, the target being to get our inmate population down to about 150 during this power disruption. And by the way, I also have Captain Paul Norris from the detention center here with me today who can speak to some of the intricacies of a project like this. So we are working to get the inmate population down by not releasing, but RORing inmates until their court date. And also, we are housing out inmates that should not be released, but can be moved to other facilities until we have full control of the power back. So, ultimately, we're looking at an average of $60 per inmate per day. And currently, we have inmates housed out to Davies DeKalb, Jackson County, and Johnson County, Missouri. I need to clarify that because a while back, someone had gotten confused and wondered why we were housing in Johnson County, Kansas. We are not. It's Johnson County, Missouri. And between the ROR inmates and the number of inmates that we are housing out, which we estimate to be between 60 and 75. This morning, the population was hovering about 173, I think. Is that correct? So we're getting closer, but we're not quite there yet. We also have an estimate that this project is going to be finished in up to 90 days, which is going to put us at about August. So the short ultimate ask here is that depending on 60 or 75, we're looking at about $324,000 to $405,000 to house inmates out. I will note that in the past, the Sheriff's Office has had a line item in its operating budget for times such as this, where we would have to house out for any number of reasons, but this year we opted to remove that item because we were trying to balance the budget, and quite honestly, in the 10 years that I've been working with the budget, never once have I seen us have to access that line. It was always there as just a last-ditch insurance, if you will. But we're past that now. I jokingly told the county administrator that if we had to come back and request money to house out a large number of inmates, there would be kind of an issue afoot, and we're there. So I do hate to be in front of you today asking for this amendment to a project that was already funded, but it is a project that we see value in, and for the facility security and the safety of our personnel and the inmates, we need to make sure that we have a proper ratio of corrections staff available to keep operations going. So I know I've thrown a lot at you. Again, you'll see that the total request is for $450,000. $345,000 of that is for housing costs, and the other $104,000 and change is for the project completion. And so if we want to go to the companion item, the request for transfer within a fund, Sheriff's Office staff worked with auditor staff and with the county administrator to identify whether or not it was even proper for us to come to you to ask for this additional ARPA money. And we were able to locate some funds that were unencumbered. And so that's what the request for transfer is.
You ready for questions?
I'm ready for questions.
Okay. They're bundled together, these two expenses. Are they bundled together as a function of time, or are they related to one another? In other words, did the wiring issue that came up, and anybody who's ever remodeled a home knows what it's like to break into electrical service and say, oh my gosh, I've got to do an upgrade, or I've got to do this or that. So that's pretty understandable. How are the two items related? Is it mainly just a time function, or did the extra expense that we're going to need to do to get the wiring up to snuff, how does that impact the inmate expense?
Sure, absolutely. They're bundled because we believe that the inmate housing out issue would not exist if it weren't for the amount of time it's going to take to address this fire wiring. So the amount of time, and it's not that the entire facility is affected, and again, Captain Norris can speak to this, but sections will be shut down in various stages to address the specific area, the cabinets that they're working on. And so the amount of time, 90 days of having disrupted power in a detention facility, we have to move whole day rooms to secured areas in the facility, and we can't shut them all down at once. And so it's the length of time that is created by this project that requires us to consider housing out for an extended period of time. That's why they're bundled together. And because this was an ARPA-related project in the beginning, that's why we came in and requested the ARPA funding for the security of these inmates in other areas.
So the wiring issue that came up, which I don't think anybody could have foreseen, is what precipitated the need to have the 345 to outsource the inmates.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson, I believe you have a question or comment?
Yeah, so a couple of questions, just so I follow this right. So the wiring issue, that's just a code thing. We have to do it, right? That's really not an option. That's got to be done.
That has to be done, yes.
So that's done deal. And you're saying to do this work, we have to move some of the inmates out, essentially. Now, were you talking about ORing some inmates, or are you talking about releasing some inmates on their own recognizance, or are you talking about moving them all to other facilities?
We're talking about releasing some on recognizance. And again, if you would like some additional information, I would defer to Captain Norris because he's been working directly with the prosecutor's office to identify specific inmates. So it's a mixture of us housing some out and working with the prosecutor's office to release some.
So I'd be curious to know how many are going to be OR'd, and to what counties are they going to be OR'd to? Are they all ours, or are they from other counties?
Can you speak to
And
that? Yeah, come on up. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Paul Norris, captain at the Sheriff's Office over the detention center. So to answer your question, sir, yes, it started off, we were going to get ROR for some of the inmates, and we knew that we can't do it for all. It depended upon what they were classified as for their charge that they were in the detention center for. So well, that idea didn't go over so well with the judges, obviously, and I understand that, but we had to start somewhere. So some people are receiving RRs for traffic offenses, things of that nature. The largest majority of our inmate population, though, we're busing them and are housing them out at other facilities. We can't get those people released. They're murderers, rapists, things of that nature. We know that. We're not even going to go down that road. So I have to move the inmates for the safety and security of, first and foremost, of my staff. Secondly, I have to also consider the inmate safety, because when Amy's saying we lose complete power, I'm already there. I've lost complete power of my housing floor. The housing floor is where all the inmates are at. So I have no door locks. We can't control that. We have to use keys. That requires in a large day room, when you have inmates, that somebody has to go in and put them in their cells, get them out of their cells. I have to all the way to the courthouse. I can't get inmates moved back and forth without the courthouse security unit and our deputies working in conjunction with keying the doors. I will lose power when they say that to lights. At some point, they're going to bring in portable lighting into the hallways of my housing floor so they can illuminate my day room so we can look in to see what are the inmates doing. You know, we need that. It's going to affect the entire facility. My master control facility right now, it was the first thing to go down, so we don't have a way to operate our master control, which is the brains of the operation. We've had to shift that operation up to our 400 control, and that's one person now trying to do the external doors of the building into booking and also controlling different areas of the housing floor complete areas. So it wasn't designed that, but it's a fail-safe.
Okay, but my question is, how many people are going to be released on their own recognizance?
I can't give you that because I don't know. We've been releasing some. I don't have an actual number. If you're asking for ROR, you mean release the streets, or are you asking for the number of inmates we're going to house out?
That you're going to release on the streets?
Okay, that I don't know. The prosecutor's office, working with them, they will identify somebody and they say, you know what, when their court date comes up, they'll go and they'll just say, we're going to ask judge, the state will petition the court for an ROR. So we don't have a set number of any RORs. We don't. We just floated the idea to the prosecutors. The prosecutor's office has looked at the list of our population, and they are making that judgment call as to this person may qualify, this person may not. So when they go have their court dates, they don't tell us that.
And no guesses on even an estimation of how many?
No.
So my concern,
I understand,
is recidivism, and we know recidivism rates are high, and
Yep.
That's my concern, is we put more criminals back out on the streets and crime goes back up. I just wonder if there's any other options as opposed to releasing people that haven't done their time yet all the way.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And that was my concern too. I'm the one that had to go over and sit with prosecutors and say, hey, I have an idea here, and I had to listen to them. And I agree with them too. So It's not, we're not going down that road of a large amount. We really and truly aren't. There's some that have been sentenced, we need to get them out of here down to wherever they need to go. So we're stepping back and we're trying to quickly get as many of those people out. It's the housing.
I'm assuming no violent criminals, no felons,
Nope.
it's just gonna be all misdemeanor, traffic, rate, drunk driver, nonviolent kind of stuff.
Correct. So you would think we house for our city partners, their city charges, things of that nature. If that's, if we can say, hey, can you get them out of our system for temporarily while we get this construction done? Things of that nature. We're not releasing felonies, serious misdemeanors, anything of that nature, no.
So I'll just go on record saying it's my desire that we release as few as we have to. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's your desire as well, but if there's any other alternatives that we have or anything else we can come up with to prevent that from happening, because we know how recidivism rates work and how that impacts crime, so that's my only comment.
Before I go to Commissioner Wagner, sometimes it's easy in dealing with governments to use acronyms. Could you, for people who are listening and maybe not as up to speed, ROR, and what that entails so that citizens who are listening could have a better frame of reference?
Released on their own recognizance. It's just the court term that the judges will use and the prosecutor's office will use. The terminology is that before a judge, they have to issue it. The state has to either agree or disagree. So before the judge would issue an ROR, release on their own recognizance.
Is there a standard standard rule of thumb who is and who is not eligible, or is it pretty much case by case?
It's going to be case by case. Really, the prosecutors will review what the charges are, their background, things of that nature, and then they have to petition the courts, and the courts either agree or they disagree.
That's great. And by the way, just for general purposes, whenever we use acronyms, sometimes it's good to identify them and define them so that citizens who may not be as schooled in that area understand precisely what we're talking about. So,
Understand.
With that, Commissioner Wagner, I believe you wish to be recognized.
Thank you. So thank you, Captain, for being here. Several questions,
Yes, sir.
actually. I'm cluing in on your housing cost estimates. And first question is that a rate that the county must guarantee? That is to say, for example, would we be contracting with those various counties and basically buying the beds even if we don't use them?
So that is the rate that comes from that facility. And are you asking, is it a set rate or is it our rate?
Well, there's what I am familiar with because I got to do this in Kansas City. Number one, I'm surprised that if Jackson County is charging you $60 per inmate per day, I'm shocked. Because that is strange to me that they would charge you so low. And I'm looking through here to see if I can see some of these numbers and I don't see them.
Oh,
so
that they're charging us low. Jackson County is actually not charging us at all.
At all?
No. But the majority of our inmates are in Davies DeKalb.
Okay. That's even more curious, but I'll skip that. So my question then, if it is Davis DeKalb, again, I go back to, are we only paying for the beds we use, or are we having to guarantee that the beds are available and therefore paying something to guarantee their availability?
No, we will just be invoiced each month or week. I haven't seen anything yet come through, but we will only be charged per service, what we've actually used.
That's good. Then how do we handle transportation to and from the facility?
Our transportation unit, once we identify the ones that we are going to, we've got the okay through the prosecutors and the judge to off-site locate to Davies DeKalb, Johnson, or Jackson, we use our transport unit and they drive them.
Okay. And so I guess that just gets to number of folks who may be out of service, or is that a dedicated unit where it doesn't matter, they would not be out on patrol, so to speak, this is what they do 24/7?
This is what they do on a daily basis, correct.
Okay, fine. And then is there any chance that anyone that we would want to send to any of these facilities could be refused?
I think the facility, yes, they could refuse anyone they want to, but our classification unit calls ahead We send them pre-packets, or like the booking and information of who they are, what they're here for with us in Clay County. They get an opportunity to review all that information. They haven't so far said, no, we don't want any particular type of individual.
Okay, and I would assume anyone that they would refuse, we would still maintain in our facilities.
Exactly, of course, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then, actually, my last question is for the administrator. What is the remaining ARPA funding if we say yes today?
My suggestion would be if all your questions are answered about the project and the housing costs, then I'll step up and make a change.
That's fine. I'll let others ask if they've got
In case
other
anybody has any other
questions.
questions of the captain.
But that's what I got left, so.
Commissioner Lawson.
I guess the bottom line here is that we have to have this done. It was just through no fault of ours, the county, or the sheriff, that this happened. They just did the wiring improperly. So it's not a matter of how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, or anything else. It's a matter that we're dealing with the safety of our people, our employees, the safety of the inmates. It's something that has to happen. And I think from the sound of it, you've done a really good job of saying, this is how much it's going to cost. We're doing it as quickly as we can. We're doing it as safely as we can. So I just don't see that there's much else to discuss other than the fact that this is a have-to situation, right?
Agreed, yes. I will tell you, in 1995, I worked one evening shift in detention where we had no power and had to key lock things. I can't imagine his people, his staff, doing that for weeks. So my hat's already off to those folks.
Well, when he said something about a dark hallway, I thought, oh, great. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, it's an unfortunate thing. I think we spend money on things that I don't feel are as important. This is a matter of safety, and I think it's something that we have to get done.
I did have a couple of additional questions. One would be, when would this work? When do you plan to start this work? What I'm getting at is the numbers. I agree with Commissioner Johnson. The numbers, and they're not going to be solid numbers. You can't say it's going to be X dollars and 37 cents. But would a week give you a chance to maybe sharpen those numbers up so we had a little bit better idea of what we were committing money to as far as the amount goes? Because, you know, obviously it's a broad window, but you really don't know at this point how many inmates you're going to have to be sending to some place that would be charging us, the fee that they charge.
And I assume you're referring just to the cost of housing the inmates, not the other portion to complete the project?
Well, they're kind of related, because if you start the project, the inmates have to be moved.
The project is already going.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at is, right now it's between 324,000 and 405,000. There seemed to be some some doubt as far as exactly how many, and it's a totally reasonable doubt, as far as how many can be released, how many we can put in other facilities. I assume that's an ongoing process. If we were to approve this next week instead of this week, would you guys have a better handle on the numbers that we're talking about as far as the money we're committing, or is that week really not going to get us any more specific an idea of what the ask is?
I understand the nature of your question. I wish that I could tell you yes, but the answer is no. A week isn't going to make a difference as far as us being able to firm those numbers up, because I know that Captain Norris and his classification unit, this is an everyday, you come in, you look at what our population is, you call, you see who's got what beds available, and you determine which inmates we are able to move to other facilities. And again, just looking at the target population of 150, knowing that there's 170 in there now, we're not going to be able to get all the way down to that 150. And it's going to fluctuate. And like I know last week, and I don't have the numbers for this, but I know that, we shipped several out. I say shipped. We moved several inmates, and then there was an operation in a local city, and, many more came in. So, I mean, it's just a constant juggling act, and we want to make sure that we're open and being able to service our citizens and the other agencies that bring us inmates, but we also have to keep in mind that while we want to get to 150, it's not going to happen. And I will tell you that I used 60, 324,000 to 75, 405,000, but in reality, it's likely going to be closer to 324, because if Jackson County continues to house for us and isn't charging us, obviously that's going to lower that number. I just don't know how many they can take for us on a regular basis.
I guess one of the things that prompted the question was that there seems to be no real handle on how many would be released on reconnaissance. So there seems to be not even a ballpark number that I'm picking up on. Maybe I missed it. So I mean, that was the kind of thing I was thinking was if as you work through that, you could say, okay, we have identified, say, 30 detainees who we feel qualified to do that, and that way it would obviously make a difference on the number.
Well, Paul and I haven't talked about this, so I'm going to give him free rein to correct me in open session here if I'm wrong. But I would venture to say that what we have in our facility now is what we're going to have. I mean, obviously, to speak to your concern, nobody wants to just be randomly releasing people onto the streets. Absolutely not. But if there is a case that the judge might consider before him or her that, okay, this is somebody that I would have already, considered sending them out on release on their own recognizance rather than, sentencing them now, I'm just going to go ahead and do the ROR. It's not like we're going through our roster saying, okay, what about this one and this one and this one and this one? I would venture to say we've got 173 in the facility this morning. We'd like to get to 150, but in reality, I don't see many of those folks, honestly, if any. I don't, how many of you had come out now? Just maybe?
ROR?
Yeah, none? Again, it was.
We don't have those numbers.
It was a conversation, but the majority of our inmate population reduction has come from moving them out to other facilities. So
The ROR is something that happens even if we asked or didn't ask. It just happens. It goes to the courts. We know that. We didn't ask going and saying, we have these people here that we think can be ROR'd. It's not what we did. We just had a list. We were at 290. We took it to the prosecutor's office and the judges, and we said, how can we best control this in population numbers? That's when we arrived at, let's ship them to a different location if we can. Well, that's great, but unfortunately that costs money to do that. So this is where we're at. Now, any RORs that have occurred, it wasn't because we went to the courts and we asked them, oh, this person, that person. It could have been that the prosecutors has this list, the judges already know, and that's what they were going to set and do anyway. That's how it played out. We didn't come up with a set number.
So I mean, the thing is, you're going to be obviously pursuing that more than you would in normal times because of the need, or at least investigating.
We'll pursue more housing them out.
Okay. At what point have you already started moving prisoners, or inmates, I should say, to other facilities? Is that process already in motion?
yes, but he can tell you the specific numbers. Like I said, I haven't seen any bills come in from other facilities yet. We're trying to get ahead of that happening. I mean, I think we sent some to Davies DeKalb today.
There's 10 at Johnson County, Missouri, there's 10 at Jackson County, and we have 20 right now at Davies DeKalb. And we have Clinton County and Buchanan County as willing to help us out. We also have Caldwell County, but we might be able to get to where we need to around that 150 before we have to go to Caldwell.
Okay. So the process is already underway. And then I guess maybe the last question is, so, say everything just goes right and we end up not expending the amount of money that is required, will that money then be swept back into the ARPA funding, or will it stay in this account? Or, okay, so it would be returned to the original account that it came out of, okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
I believe.
It's not a cash grab, it's just to get through this difficult time, and then we would return that, obviously.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's going towards money, so. you
All
want me
right,
to-
before
you
we
wanna
do
take
that,
a-
though, because I think Commissioner Wagner had some other questions, but Commissioner Johnson, I didn't want to leave this part of the topic if you had something to say on that. Let me go ahead and recognize you if you don't mind, please.
So I just want to clarify on the release on their own recognizance. I think I understand it, but I want to make sure everybody understands this.
Absolutely, sure.
There is, right now, you guys house people that have been sentenced, as well as you house already sentenced for a crime, convicted, sentenced. You also house people who've been arrested but have not yet gone to trial for whatever
Correct.
reason. You sometimes release people on their own recognizance on a regular basis for a variety of reasons already, having nothing to do with this. But when you release someone on their own recognizance, it is those people who have been arrested who have not yet been convicted.
Correct.
So you will not be releasing anybody who's been sentenced for their crime. In other words, it's not an early release from sentencing. It's just they're released on their own recognizance by their signature saying, hey, I promise to come back to my court date, essentially.
Absolutely correct. And I want to clarify that when you say we release, I know you're just talking about the system as a whole, but I want to clarify that the sheriff's office is taking these actions at the direction of the prosecutor's office, okay? So, I'm sorry, the courts.
And
So
the court, yeah.
Yeah, the courts. It's taking these actions at the direction of the courts. And we are just, whatever the adjudication is, we respond to that. So if the courts say this person is eligible and you can release them, then we will do so.
Yeah.
But again, I want to clarify, he has not asked anybody to take any specific action.
I just want to make sure anybody listening understands, we're not releasing criminals who've been convicted out earlier, that kind of stuff. And
No,
just for the
sir.
record, I completely trust our sheriff and our sheriff's department that the right thing's going to be done here. But that's just my concern, is about the recidivism and that kind of stuff.
Yes,
Thank you for making that point, Commissioner Johnson. That's one that I was working on the assumption of, but I'm glad it was given voice and expressed here, as you say, so that people understand it. With that, I believe we were going to go to, unless you'd like to say something else, we'll go ahead and recognize the administrator. I think you wanted to get into the financials of it a bit.
If you would bear with me just a moment as I bring up just a really brief PowerPoint. So because this is an ARPA project, I thought it would be a great opportunity to kind of not only talk about where the funds for the additional money that is being requested, but in essence, how is the ARPA funding account and what does it look like at this point in time? And so to Commissioner Nolte's question about if all the funds are not expensed for this particular project, they don't need as much for the housing of the inmates, that, like any of our other ARPA projects, once we close out an ARPA project, the money goes back into ARPA. And so as we get closer, we will be coming back to the commission because there'll be some additional funding and some additional projects that could be funded with ARPA at that point in time. So this one might be a little hard to read, but if you will bear with me, I will walk you through it. So just as a reminder, the county received ARPA funding in the amount of $48.5 million over 2 years. And there are 4 different categories of ARPA projects. One is COVID response, another one is infrastructure, economic recovery, and the last one is called lost revenue. In the lost revenue category, that is the most flexible funding for the county, and based on a formula or based on the rules under ARPA, the county gets to utilize $10 million as lost revenue. So out of the $48.5 million, $10 million of that is in the lost revenue category. The remaining amount of that $48 million can be allocated in any of the other 3 categories. And we have historically in the past put together and set aside funding in each one of those categories. But what we have before you today is to move some of those monies around because we're short in one fund or one category to accommodate the increase in the sheriff's project. So just to kind of walk you through the numbers, under COVID response, that has been authorized by the commission for projects that are underway is $16.4 million. We also have a line item here called amount allocated. So as you recall, last year when we came forward with the plan for ARPA funding, we identified projects and we asked for allocations per project. As those projects have moved forward, we have come to the commission and basically have you give authorization to spend those dollars. So not every project that has been allocated has come forward yet at this point in time. So that's what we're talking about, amount allocated. So it's kind of set aside, it's been promised, but it's not been authorized at this point in time. Infrastructure, so what has been authorized to date is $9.1 million. Now we have an amount allocated for all the other projects that's $7.2 million. A lot of that is our own stormwater projects. And so what we've done is we've come to the commission and had you authorize, and we are currently under design of our stormwater projects. But what's sitting there in the allocated amount is our estimate on what it will cost to construct those stormwater projects. So in essence, those funds are not available at this point in time to be spent or to be reallocated. And then we have the economic recovery category, which again to date is $4.5 million. We have amount allocated, $30,000 that is yet to be authorized. So total authorized is $30.1 million. We have 7.3 that has been allocated. So there has been a total of $37.5 million. In our lost revenue category of $10 million, 9.3 has been authorized. We have unallocated lost revenue of $642,000. But when we're looking and kind of looking at the total, we assume that all 10 million of lost revenue is going to be spent. So total authorized, total allocated, and total lost revenue is $47.5 million. So the amount that is unallocated at this point in time for the three categories of COVID response, infrastructure, and economy recovery is a little over $1 million. Now, taking into consideration the request before you of $450,000, then in essence, we would have available that is unallocated for those three categories of $564,000. Now, the transfer request is much less than that because we still have funds available in the category. As projects close, then we go back and we true it up. And so then whatever those savings are will then fall into the unallocated, unauthorized amount. And so this $564,000 will grow as projects, become concluded and hopefully are below budget. So we'll be back to you once we know how that number grows. Also in the lost revenue, 9.3 million. Some of those projects have closed, some of them have not. If they come in under budget, then this unallocated amount of 642 will also grow, and we'll come back to the commission with recommendations and requests for you to consider. That number will never, however, go over $10 million. Those are the rules of ARPA. So I'm happy to answer any questions about kind of where we are right now. It is a point in time. As projects close, those funds change. But basically, there's $640,000 of lost revenue that has not been allocated or authorized. And in the other three categories, with this request that we have before us today, there's about $564,000 that is unallocated. So we certainly can accommodate the request of the Sheriff's Department on their ARPA project.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Diana, for going through all that. I always raise issues when it comes to things like this because even though when things true up, money comes back in, it's my understanding that eventually ARPA funds have to be spent by a certain time. Which I believe is the end of 24 or 25?
24, unless it is construction projects, and then you have to have it under contract,
Yeah.
I believe, by the end of 24. But it's been a while since I looked at that. So we're continuing to, push to get our projects done. And certainly on our stormwater projects, we're pushing with our engineers to get those designed so that we can get those under contract for construction.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just say that I agree with our colleague, Commissioner Lawson's assessment of this project. I understand it, and understand why we have it. I just want to raise the issue that you don't have ARPA money forever, and then you start figuring out where's the, then it starts to be painful as far as figuring out how you can deal with these sorts of adjustments. So I appreciate you going through it in detail. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for the update. I think it's, a helpful lay of the land and where we're at with these funds, and thanks to the Sheriff's Office as well. And I also agree with Commissioner Lawson. This sounds like a sort of unavoidable situation, and, obviously it's a big bill, but we don't really have an option. Ultimately, we have to keep the jail going and the inmates housed. So I'm grateful to y'all for, the work that you're putting in to resolve this as well. One additional request in terms of, because I really appreciate the update on where we're at with ARPA. Obviously, that's been one of the biggest things of the last couple of years that we've done is, allocate tens of millions of dollars. I would also appreciate at some point sort of a breakdown of where those funds have gone. I know we did that sort of at a midpoint through the process, maybe about a year ago. But I think it would be helpful to know between outside agencies as well as county departments, in addition to sort of these categories, where those funds have gone in total as we approach sort of the end of distributing the money. But yeah, for now, I obviously recommend that we pay the bills for these jail operations and move this thing forward. So, thanks.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dan. At first, my only question is to you, as far as the sheriff's proposal is concerned in using these ARPA funds, are you okay with that, or do you think there's a better way to fund this, or?
No, I would say, well, certainly the challenges that have occurred because of the wiring issue certainly are a direct relationship to the project that was originally requested. With regard to the housing of inmates, it's sort of the but-for test. But for the project, we wouldn't necessarily have these costs and have to house inmates outside of our facility. And as, Captain Agdarian said when we went through the budget process and looking historically, it's not something the county has typically done. So I would say my recommendation is this does seem to be a very good use of these funds to make this project get completed as timely as it can and as safely as it can.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yeah, can I just wanted to go ahead and call for 2023-172 and 2023-173 to be approved.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-172 and 173. Further discussion. I wanted to ask the captain, I'm not sure if you said so or not, but I was working on the assumption, I think we all kind of were, that you were requesting action on that this evening, on those issues.
Yes, please.
Okay. Are there any further discussion on those two items? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
Oh.
I'd say I close.
I close.
Very well. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Lawson? Yes. Commissioner
Yes.
Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, Captain. That brings us to the last item on our regular agenda. That would be 2023-174. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-174 is acceptance of a grant for the county jail maintenance and improvements in the amount of $58,805.50 from the State of Missouri Department of Public Safety. Captain Agdarian is here to provide information to the commission.
Please proceed.
All right, Captain Amy Agdarian, Clay County Sheriff's Office. This time, I'm glad to come before you and ask for ask for commission acceptance of a grant from the County Jail Maintenance and Improvement in the amount of $58,805.50. This is a 50-50 grant match, and the Facilities Department and the Sheriff's Office has already spoken about how we can fund our half of this grant. So, or match these funds. So Facilities has, I believe, some use tax. It's in a use tax line, is that correct? Correct, yes. Facilities has $50,000 in a use tax line for detention that can go towards the county's match for this grant, and the Sheriff's Office will utilize a discretionary fund to fund the other $8,850, I believe is, yeah, $805.50. So, in this particular case, we're just asking for commission approval to accept this grant.
Okay.
I guess I should explain to you why.
Yeah, but that would help. Please.
I was just so excited that we were asking to, that we weren't asking for money. So, this grant is to retrofit some jails in some cell doors in our detention facility with pass-through chuck hole access. And initially, the grant was written to purchase new doors. And the pass-throughs are great because it allows us to pass food, materials. If we need to have somebody, I don't know, just for the safety of our staff, there's just less contact, okay, less contact with the inmates. So the grant was written to replace, I believe it was 50 doors? 50 doors. But after we received the grant, I asked if there was a possibility that we could amend the grant, and we are going to be able to do that so that Captain Norris can work with another company that we've located that can retrofit our existing doors with the chuck holes and allow for about 73 doors to be retrofitted. So again, I appreciate Captain Norris's diligence to locate another vendor that could give us another product, and still we could use these grant funds to retrofit 73 doors instead of the 50 that we had originally thought we'd be able to do. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Wagner.
Move to approve 2023-174.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-174. Is there any discussion, any questions? Seeing, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lawson, did you?
No.
Oh, I saw your thing lit up. That's okay. Commissioner Wagner, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. That brings us to our discussion items. There is one item. Administrator, if you'd like to proceed with that.
Thank you. The topic is the Regional Resource Sharing Agreement. Commission may recall that we talked about this a couple of meetings ago with regard to the request that we'd received through Mid-America Regional Council to be a voluntary signature for Regional Resource Sharing Agreement. Commission had some questions. And again, I want to reiterate the same information that we shared with you at that point in time is, this particular agreement is not to supersede any of our existing mutual aid agreements, first responders that currently exist. This is really putting into place your approval that if we would receive a request from another agency needing some assistance from a highway department that needed a truck and some staff, or somebody from our parks department, that we had the administrative aspects of that in place and we could assist those agencies when needed. Certainly if it is a natural disaster, then it's going to go through our emergency management directors and will fall under all of that protocol. This is really sort of a supplement to the ones that we've already had. So our staff actually had met prior to when it was brought to the commission with highway and parks and all were concurred that if we have the ability to assist another agency, which we do now, we'd certainly continue to do those operations. There were some questions by the Sheriff's Department, and so we sat down and met with Sheriff Aiken about the particular agreements and how it does not take away from their agreements that they have in place. And he's here and he can certainly answer any questions you may have of him. Also, I think during that meeting, the commission asked a little bit about Mark and who helped design this agreement and who all had signed on already and who was thinking about that. So we also invited David Warm, who is here this afternoon from Mid-America Regional Council, to also answer your questions with regard to the MARC process, and also maybe even talk a little bit about MARC in general and the services that we provide. So certainly Sheriff Aiken and Mr. Warm and I are happy to answer any questions about this or about MARC and the services they provide.
If you'd like to come up and address the commission, Ms. Warren, certainly you're more than welcome to do so. Or the sheriff, either one.
David's an important person, so I want to give him a lot of time. So Will Aiken, Sheriff of Clay County, I just want to summarize the meeting that we had with the county administrator and staff. So what was throwing me off was the emergency response piece. In my mind, emergency response is first responders, but when we were talking about it, county administrator was actually able to give me a different lens to look through. And emergency response can be broken water pipes in a building. And so if we have resources in Clay County that can help another jurisdiction out, then that's where that agreement would come into. If we have broken water pipes on the side of the road and a backhoe is needed or something like that. But there's still enough overlapping for emergency management response or first responder response. In the event that that broken water line turns into a boil order, now we have an entire neighborhood or a division that we have to respond to. That's where the overlapping comes in. And so the emergency response piece was the part that was throwing me off. But when you think about how it's an emergency when you're talking about a water line, just for one example, I completely understood it. So I have no issue with this resource sharing agreement, and I just want to let you all know that I support it.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the sheriff? Seeing none, thank you.
See, that was quick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, it's a pleasure to be here and to speak to you a little bit about this agreement. I really don't have much to add. You sort of have the context for it. I will just give you sort of by way of history. This began at the initiative of about a dozen emergency managers from around the region who were really following the lead of a FEMA suggestion as they were reviewing our emergency response capacity in the region, which is exceptional, about how we could continue to innovate around best practices. There are not a lot of these in America. There are a few of them, and we will be among leaders in our region if the support for this continues to move forward. And I just to underscore, this requires you to do nothing in a particular situation. The decisions about when to lend or receive or ask for support or equipment are up to this jurisdiction in the context of any given event. It just does all the preliminary groundwork so that can be done quickly and easily and seamlessly with some established ground rules. And I'm happy to talk more about those ground rules if those are important to you. We actually started work on this. The emergency manager started work on it about 3 years ago, and then the pandemic happened and it all stalled. And so they picked up their work again last year and began dusting it off and came up with the agreement that's in front of you late last year. It was endorsed by the MARC Board of Directors. Commissioner Nolte and Auditor Hurlburt were a part of that discussion at the beginning of this year, and then we have begun the process of walking it through just this winter and spring with local jurisdictions. To date, there have been 15 local jurisdictions that have signed on to the agreement, and that includes in Clay County, North Kansas City, and Excelsior Springs. I'm happy to go through the other 13. Kansas City, Missouri has it under legal review. We're expecting that to be completed in the coming weeks, so that process starts, and we're just continuing to work through this process around the region, and I expect it'll take a good part of the next several months to get widespread adoption. But the more we get, the easier it will be for jurisdictions in a given situation to respond quickly and support one another or ask one another for support. And with that, I've got Jason White, who's a member of our emergency management team, if you have some more detailed questions about it. But I'm happy to talk more about this agreement. I appreciate the sheriff's comments about the work that's been done and how it supplements the excellent emergency response coordination capacity that already exists within our law enforcement agencies and other local agencies. And I'm happy to answer questions about this or to tag team with the sheriff or Jason, or I'm also happy to just share a little bit more about the Mid-America Regional Council, because I know some of you are relatively new in your roles and have not interacted with us as much as others of you had.
I think what I'd like to do, I've got two commissioners who had questions, so let's go ahead and handle the issue at hand. But I don't think it departs too much from our discussion subject to give us just kind of a little bit more about Mark after we've gotten these questions out of the way, to give this issue some context. So from that point of view, Commissioner Wagner, if you'd like to proceed.
No, thank you. Well, first of all, David, good to see you, and thanks for coming
Likewise.
today. I wanted to ask a question very reminiscent of the comment that the Sheriff made, but it's the kind of the context, the reason why we're going through all this. Because one has to imagine some sort of difficulty or disaster that comes as to, really, we should have a plan around this. The Sheriff mentioned an example of perhaps a broken water main, that may cause a boil order, so now we're rallying around that. Are there other examples that maybe that group of emergency managers saw that prompted the discussion? I'll stop there, let you answer that.
I would say in the main, the most common situation is when a severe weather event disrupts a certain part of the community or essential facilities, particularly if it's in a smaller jurisdiction and they simply don't have the machinery or personnel on deck to respond quickly, and it is very helpful when they're able to turn to their neighbors. And that happens with some frequency throughout the course of any given year. And equipment and personnel have historically been easily lended and shared. This just paves that process, clarifies on the front end where liability stands, where remuneration stands. Those kinds of questions get clarified on the front end to just make it easier in the context of any decision for that to occur seamlessly. But I would say it's probably in the disaster recovery space where a jurisdiction simply doesn't have the ability to respond with the speed that they would otherwise want to.
Commissioner Johnson.
First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you coming here tonight. The only question I have is, on this list, you have about 16 or so cities and counties who have not yet signed on to this. Do you know if there's any trepidation on their part?
No, we're just early on in the process. As I said, Kansas City, Missouri is under review. Johnson County, Kansas is in legal review. They've had some switch in legal staff, so we had to kind of restart some of the legal review in both of those situations. We're poised for a couple of others are online, and it's on their agendas in the coming weeks. So this is just a process.
Okay, so no pushback from anybody?
No pushback, nobody that we've encountered yet that says, no, we don't want to participate. I expect that once we get more county governments, I think we're sort of leaning into the county governments, it will be easier for us to approach the other cities within that county.
Okay.
And so that's a part of our strategy in rolling this out as well.
Okay. And I'm assuming, I guess this is for Diana, or our emergency coordinator, that our emergency coordinator is on board with this and supports this as well?
Yeah, Melissa was in the meeting also. And so it is having that dialogue and that conversation, keeping everybody in the loop. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yeah, I just briefly want to say thanks, for the information. I think this makes a lot of sense for us to do. I think these intergovernmental cooperation agreements often make a lot of sense, and to your point, it's already sort of being done. This maybe can just sort of streamline the process and make it so we're not reinventing the wheel every time there's a disaster and having to worry about how to do it in terms of liability concerns and all that. So very briefly back on that subject, though, of who has signed. So it would be our expectation as of today that Kansas City and Johnson County are likely to adopt this at some point in the future.
They could well have been in the working group that helped to generate it. I'm not certain, but as far as we know, there are no obstacles that we're foreseeing in Kansas City or in Johnson County, Kansas.
Thank you. Any sense of Jackson County as well?
Likewise, yeah. And several major jurisdictions like Independence and Lee Summit have already adopted it. And in fact, I'll be honest with you, a couple of places, some school districts who care about these things as well have also come forward and said, we'd like to be a part of this. And it's intended to apply to special districts where that makes sense as well.
Good deal, yeah. No, it's just, I think it's certainly helpful for me to know that some of the bigger jurisdictions, Kansas City, Johnson County, Jackson County are likely to be doing it. I think for this to be a successful endeavor, they would, really need to be part of it, I would think.
I concur.
All right, thank you so much.
Are there any other commissioners that have questions? One thing that I would like you to do, because this is a small part of what our participation in MARC brings us, so to give this particular issue context, can you kind of just give us a very 30,000-foot view of the function of MARC, and that way we understand that this is not a one-off?
Right. The Mid-America Regional Council is essentially an association of all the local governments in metropolitan Kansas City, and we are formally formed by an intergovernmental agreement among the 9 counties in the metropolitan area, 4 in Kansas, 5 on the Missouri side, and the 6 largest cities in the region, and then we represent all of the other 119 cities that are throughout the metropolitan area. That is our primary area of focus, although some of our services will extend to counties and areas beyond that in both directions. And we simply exist as a platform to allow for jurisdictions and community organizations to work cooperatively in planning, decision-making, and service delivery. We have no taxing authority, no regulatory authority. I often joke that the words mark and authority are seldom used in the same sentence. I mean, we only do what organizations, city governments, county governments, others in the community decide they want to do together, or we often will work in response to a federal program and help to either bring money in or be the agency by which we carry out regional functions that are supported and funded or encouraged by state or federal agencies. And we work in a host of policy and program areas. One of our core functions, as many of you know, is in transportation. We have the responsibility under federal law of keeping charge of the long-range transportation plan for the metropolitan area and then allocating some of the funds that are designated for this metropolitan area for projects to support that plan, and then ensuring coordination among all the cities, counties, states, and federal investments in our transportation system so that they make sense as a whole. And that is a big part of our operation. But we also carry out specific transportation functions. For instance, we manage a program called Operation Greenlight, which is a signal coordination system that connects 759 intersections around the region, including about 100 in Clay County and the cities and around the region that are either in Kansas City on the MoDOT system or in the local government systems. We do a lot of technical planning on certain corridors or work on different specific transportation initiatives. We do a lot of work in environmental protection. We have responsibility for making sure the region stays in compliance with air quality standards, and so we both do some planning and policy development. We don't do any regulation there, but the states contract with us to carry out the strategies for ensuring our region stays in compliance with federal air quality standards. We do a lot of work in stormwater management, in solid waste management. We serve as the solid waste management district for the Missouri part of the region that helps us support recycling and waste reduction activities. We do a lot of just intergovernmental coordination and cooperation. For instance, we have a cooperative purchasing program that allows for you to buy heavy equipment through national and local bids that can drive down the cost and save money for taxpayers. We support a forum that brings together regional managers. We're working on some regional housing concepts that are helping local governments coordinate their strategies around affordable housing. We do a lot of work in social services. We're responsible for serving as what is called the Area Agency on Aging for the Missouri part of the region and deliver other older adult services across the region. We serve some 8,000 older adults on the Missouri part of the region, including about 1,400 older adults in Kansas City with in-home services, whether it's transportation or meals support or medication management. We've got some very sophisticated partnerships with hospitals and insurance companies that are allowing us to use some of their resources to support in-home services to get better health outcomes and to drive down readmissions into hospitals. We do a whole lot of work, as you've already heard, in public safety. We have a responsibility for supporting the long-range emergency planning, all of the Homeland Security planning and coordination and exercise development for the region. We coordinate the region's 911 system, which you probably are aware of, and we have a first best-in-class system in this region, in part because all of us work together strategically to invest in technology and capacities that keep us on the forefront of technology. We coordinate a system that connects radios, 25,000 radios in public works and parks and police departments and sheriff's departments all around the region, and they have an ability to be interconnected through a system that we help to coordinate and manage, and so that we can, again, work across jurisdictions in response to emergency support. And I can give some other examples. Do a lot of work in early education. We administer a major Head Start grant for the Missouri part of the region that serves several hundred families and children in Clay County and 2,400 on the Missouri side of the region, and do other work in support of quality and access to early education, and do a lot of technical research and planning and analysis and economic research for the region as well. And so the chairman is right. This particular agreement is in the context of a larger platform that brings together different disciplines, different interests, different policy arenas that allow you to work more effectively with your counterparts around the region on the things that we need to be able to be coordinated around or supported mutually. And so I appreciate the strong commitment of this commission. We get great participation from Auditor Hurlburt and Jerry Nolte at the board level. And I know a number of you have recently signed up to be a part of one of our MARC committees, and I appreciate that. We will engage you and look forward to working with you more fully. And I would be happy to sit down with any of you one-on-one and talk more fully about any of these projects that we're working on as well. But I think in a week or two or a couple months, there'll be some dues that come forward for you to consider. And those dues essentially provide the ability for us to match all the funds that we're helped to bring in from federal, state, and philanthropic sources to support all of this work. We have a $110 million budget, and the dues are about 2.5% of that. Of the $110 million that we bring into the region, about 75% of it, maybe 80% of it, goes back out directly in sub-grants or services or contracts that are provided either to local governments or to community-based organizations. And so it's a good return on your investment when you see the dues come through, and then we're able to leverage that through cooperation to bring in lots of resources and to do things that are important for the region as a whole. So I hope that's helpful for you contextually, and I'm happy at any point to come back or to bring the right people from our staff to make a presentation on one of these topics if you want to dive into it more fully.
We may well want to. There's a number of issues, and obviously the reason was I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that while this is what we're discussing right now, this particular topic, there were other issues out there that we might potentially want to bring up at the appropriate time. But we are, in fact, as everybody knows, a growing county. So, I mean, our relationship with Mark, and this is obviously one facet of it, the issue that we're discussing right now. And as we grow and as we increase population, our ability to participate at higher levels in some of the key committees and that sort of thing, I think, becomes enhanced. So certainly we're looking forward to increasing our participation. But like I say, there were some questions about this particular issue. I'm very happy that we were able to bring them up and to discuss them, and that we certainly got the input of our sheriff and our administrator on these. So with that, are there any questions of Mr. Worm? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all.
So we had our discussion. I think probably it would be a good idea to come up with instruction to staff based on what we heard. The obvious thing to me is that we would go ahead. I don't know if you need to bring this up for us to vote on, or how you want to work this, Administrator.
I suppose what I would suggest is we will bring forward the regional resource agreement on the agenda for consideration unless there is no desire to do that.
Is that
that could be voted upon.
Is that the consensus of the commission? I see a lot of head nods, so that seems to be the case. Does that give you enough instruction to work with?
It's ready to go. We'll have it on next week's agenda. And also, Mr. Warren mentioned the service agreement with Mark, and our dues will also be on next week's agenda also. So,
very good. With that, that brings us to the conclusion of the discussion items. Next on our agenda, and by the way, thank you, Mr. Warren and company. So that brings us to the administrator comments. Administrator?
just to announce that the commission's next business meeting will be next Wednesday, May 24th at 6 o'clock here in the hearing room.
Thank you very much. That brings us to commissioner comments. Commissioner Carpenter.
No comments.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have. Commissioner Thompson. No comments. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes. Last week, we had last week, I think it was last week, we had a discussion about the 911 user fees. And I think some more information has come to light. I'm just wondering if we can put that on the agenda for discussion next week?
You can certainly put it on for discussion, yeah.
Commissioner Withington.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Lawson? No. Commissioner Wagner? I don't have a heck of a lot to say myself. It's kind of a nice day, so I think it's nice that we're all getting out of here at a reasonable hour. With that, the next item on our agenda is executive session. Is there a motion related to our executive session? By the way, we are noticed up under legal. That would be Missouri Statute 610.021 parentheses 1, and personnel, that would be Missouri Statute 610.021 parentheses 3. Is there a motion?
I guess I move to go into closed session, executive session pursuant to RSMO 610.021 sub 1 and RSMO 610.021 sub 3.
And then we would adjourn therefrom.
And then adjourn therefrom.
Motion has been made. Discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll go into executive session and adjourn therefrom.